For October, I wanted to cover a horror movie, even though it's my least favorite genre. This is probably my favorite horror movie, and I think arguably the best one, which is The Thing from 1982. I love this movie.
Whoops, you weren't meant to see that.
It's one of the few horror movies that I think has a lot of rewatchability, because every time that you rewatch it, you can catch more details and you understand more of what's going on than the previous time. Part of the reason I don't like horror, besides the fact that it stresses me out and I'm a giant pussy, is my reaction to most horror movies is just stress. And then when you finally get the answer for what the supernatural entity or alien or ghost or whatever is, usually the answer is like, oh, well, that's fucking stupid. The Thing, I think, is actually the opposite, where every time that you rewatch it, you're like, man, that was really clever. And I think it speaks really highly of a movie when you can get more enjoyment out of it on rewatches than the initial watch. The initial watch is really interesting because you're trying to figure out, along with the characters, what exactly is happening. And then the next time that you watch it and you understand, there's a lot of little things that happen that seem like nothing or weird. And you're like, ah, I see. I think it's nice that they made both the alien and the crew intelligent, or at least logical. Given what they know and the little amount of time they have to figure things out and the amount of pressure they're under, they make pretty good choices throughout the movie. Obviously there's a bunch of horror tropes, like, oh, let's all split up and walk into the dark place by ourselves so we can get picked off one by one. And then you have issues that are just created by technology, like cell phones, where one of the first things they have to do is be like, oh, we're in the middle of the woods, so there's no cell phone service. I think this movie benefits just from the setting and the idea of the alien tremendously. It does a really good job of having really big stakes when you find out what the alien is capable of partway through the movie, without trying to go crazy overboard and make everything feel epic. It simply just makes sense. And the pressure that they're under makes things super high stress. So just by putting the movie in Antarctica on this outpost, the movie did itself a lot of favors. Something also that's great throughout the movie is the visual effects. Obviously, it's all practical or very minimal CGI, if at all. I don't think there actually is any, or at least I couldn't tell. And I feel like it makes things much more visceral and gross than what they would do now, or when they eventually remake this movie like they do everything else. You know it'll be a CGI fest. You know they'll go over the top trying to make everything really disgusting and gory. And this movie plays it as just so straight that I think it actually makes it more disturbing. Something else these older movies did is they had really simple soundtracks that were very good for setting the tone in the movie. I like soundtracks better now overall because you have music from people like Hans Zimmer, John Williams, Hiroyuki Sawano. And it's music you could just listen to because it's good music. But I like the thematic music that we used to get in these old movies. Obviously, The Thing is one of them. Movies like Halloween had it. Jaws. I'm sure there's other ones you can think of that are very simplistic, but do a really good job of just setting the tone, even though you never listen to them in your free time. One of the best parts of the movie is that all the people react the way that you would expect them to react to the situation. I get so tired of seeing the kind of quippy, know-it-all, not afraid characters.
I've never been kidnapped before, so how does this work?
And throughout this movie, they are stressed out the entire time, as you would be if you were stuck on a remote base in Antarctica and didn't know who was a human and who was an alien. And the last thing I'll say before I start going through the plot is I love that the movie is well done enough that there's still debates as to who got turned and when, because there's just subtle details all over the place, but there's also enough off screen that you can kind of interpret it how you want. And even the ending is debated. I think the ending is pretty conclusive, but that even is still debated over 40 years later. So with all that said, and me just filleting this movie, let's get into the plot and I'll talk about some of the specific things that I like. And if you haven't seen this movie, go watch it. I don't even like horror. It's just a great movie. So our opening scene, we have the Norwegians chasing this husky in a helicopter and trying to snipe it. And the husky's just running and dodging. They can't quite hit it. Obviously, that'd be a pretty impressive shot to hit a running target flying in a helicopter. And right away, this is one of those scenes that the first time you watch it, you're like, why the hell are these guys trying to shoot this dog? That's kind of fucked up.
Hey man, that's not cool.
And even the people in the movie in a few minutes here are going to be like, did they go crazy? Because they've been holed up here in Antarctica. You know, that kind of isolation can drive people mad. And what you know going in with your rewatch is that the husky is the thing. So we get to see that the thing is smart. So in your rewatch, you can appreciate that the thing is intelligent right away. By masking itself as a dog, first of all, it's faster. But second of all, when it gets to this base, now whether it just ran in a random direction, it just knew this base was here, it just got lucky, don't know. But by being a husky, when it gets to the base, it's not going to really draw a lot of attention. It's not going to be taken captive the way that a person might, for instance. Because a person would have to come up with some kind of excuse for why they ran across the snow and into this base, and they'd be very suspicious.
Don't be suspicious. Don't be suspicious.
So the husky thing goes up and is kind of like licking the people and being like a playful dog. One of the Norwegian guys tries to throw a grenade at the dog. It slips because it's icy and blows him and his helicopter up. And the other guy tries to shoot the dog and hits one of the guys from the American outpost standing there. So they shoot him. So the thing got lucky in that regard that the people who know what it is got taken out and they speak Norwegian, not English, so that they couldn't communicate that, hey, it's a fucking alien. And then we get like these little shots that don't seem like anything, where the guy's trying to calm the dog down because he was just getting shot at. And we can see that the dog is looking at the helicopter exploded, knowing that it got away. And I don't know if this is true or not, but I read online that they filmed the movie in a certain way and used certain kind of cinematography tricks that whoever the thing is has no like glint or reflection in their eye, which is a pretty neat thing. I actually didn't notice that till I just read it. So right away, they're like, what the hell is wrong with those guys? Why are they flying that low and shooting at us? And they just kind of dismiss it as like, oh, cabin fever, whatever. And then we cut to Windows, and he's been reaching out for communication because of this weird situation. And he's frustrated and bitching because he hasn't gotten a hold of anybody in 2 weeks. So again, right away, by setting the movie in Antarctica, by saying it's the first week of winter and the storms are going to be getting bad, they haven't been able to get in touch with anybody. They're already super isolated.
So ornery and sad, real wrong.
A really simple thing to do, but I think they did it well, and it's a very effective setting for a horror movie. So they have a group meeting. They're trying to figure out what drove those guys crazy. They say they've only been here 2 months. They shouldn't be acting like that. That's not long enough to be that crazy. And that there was a group of 10, and they only had 2, so there should be 8 left at their outpost. It's an hour flight by helicopter there, and then an hour back. And something kind of subtle here that I really like is McReady is very dismissive of all this, just kind of going through the motions, but he's the pilot. So he's like, you really want to save those Swedes, huh? Even though they're Norwegians. And he does it a couple times here where he's being very dismissive. When he was looking at what was in their helicopter, he also noticed they had 15 gallons of kerosene. And that's another one of those details that when you see it the first time, you're like, oh, and a bunch of gas, who gives a shit? And then when you rewatch it, you're like, oh, because they figured out that fire was a good way to kill the thing also. And pretty much the entire scene when they're inspecting the Norwegian camp, you can almost see this entire movie playing out just at another outpost. And the thing gets away, obviously, at the end as a husky. And of course, we got that actually played out in the Thing prequel that came out that was dog shit.
You stupid bastard.
And I love all these little shots you get of the husky, the first like half hour-ish of the movie. Because again, it's another thing that just seems like, oh, general transition shot, you know, dogs hanging out with them, whatever. And then when you rewatch it, you're like, ah, the Huskies trying to figure out the layout of their base camp. And he's essentially doing recon. Well, I guess the thing, not the husky thing.
That's what she said.
Here's another one of those scenes that seems like nothing on a first watch. The guy's mad at the cook for playing his music loud while he's cooking. The base is pretty quiet. The dog's just wandering around. And then on your rewatch, you're like, ah, this is the first person that he infects. And by doing it as a silhouette, this is one of those things that can be debated. And I think it's pretty interesting. So my guess for the first person that's infected, even though they don't get revealed until way later, is Norris. And if you look at the shadow on the wall, you can see kind of his poofy hair. And then he has obviously a collar on. And you can see he wears this sweater button-up or polo combo where he has like the sweater collar and then the polo collar. But that's just my guess. He's obviously not the first one revealed. So they get to the Norwegian base. They see all kinds of crazy shit. There's holes in the walls to the outside. Everything inside is frozen. There's an axe through a door. The door is blocked. And we see that this guy killed himself. And they're like, what the hell happened here? So they find documents, but they're all in Norwegian. They find videotapes. And the doc grabs them. He's like, let's see what we can get from them. And that's going to be really important later on for them figuring out what's actually happening with this dog in the Norwegian camp. So McReady, played by Kurt Russell, is like, hey, Doc, over here, there's this big ice block. The Norwegians clearly pulled something out of the ice, but no clue what. And you can see it's all kind of tinged pink, obviously from blood, but you have no clue what's happening. They walk outside. They see more kerosene. They see these kind of mutilated corpses. And the first time that you see it, I think it's kind of easy to write it off as maybe a weird camera angle. Maybe they got a little bit melted and then froze to death. You don't really know what happened.
This is fine. I'm okay with the events that are unfolding currently.
And then obviously the second time that you watch it, you're like, that's fucked up. But they collect this shit to take back with them and see what the deal is. Very simple, but obviously just a logical thing to do, I think, when you have all this weird shit going on and no one to reach out to. Just another little shot that seems like a quick shot while the helicopter's landing. And again, when you see it the second time, you're like, oh, the thing is just observing all of them, kind of seeing what their behaviors are like, what the deal is, getting logistics. Just nice little touches like that all throughout the movie. So now we get a good look at it and you can see how messed up it is. And every person's like, what is that? We need to do an autopsy. And they all look horrified. And I just love these little quick cuts to the dog in the background every time. It's just such a funny thing because a dog following you from room to room would be very normal. So when you notice the thing just watching, you're kind of like, oh, they're staying next to a fucking alien monster who's stalking them and they have no idea. They do the autopsy and they're like, yeah, the organs are normal. The dead Norwegian didn't have any alcohol or drugs in his system. Not really sure what to make of this. And obviously this is really good foreshadowing when you know it's coming, that the thing is a perfect imitation and not just some weird alien that can pass as human at a glance. So the dog is walking around while they're playing poker, and one of the guys gets annoyed and is like, can you put this dog up? So Clark is like, yeah, okay. Puts him with the other dogs. And once Clark leaves, the other dogs start growling. And this is where we get the reveal of the thing being the husky the whole time. And you can see here the thing is freaking out. It's got these tentacles coming everywhere. It's really gross. I'm glad that they didn't try to make it more human in its true form or original form, whatever you want to call it. I like when they make aliens look like something completely out of our world. And it's so gross the way that it's done. But it starts lashing out all these poor huskies, and all the huskies are freaking out. You can see the one chewing through the fence. And then pretty much from this point on, the movie is really stressful because you're trying to figure out who's who. And McReady's going to get a beer, and him being an alcoholic is clearly part of his character. He has a drink in his hand pretty much the whole movie when they're not actively trying to fight this thing or find it. And he hears the dogs freaking out and immediately pulls the fire alarm. Again, really nice. I'm glad we don't see him do the whole slow walk over, see what's going on. Oh, maybe I should get some help thing that we see in a lot of dumbass movies. Just right away, he pulls the alarm, lets everyone know that something's wrong.
Oh my god! We're having a fire sale!
And I mainly wanted to show this just because how good it looks. I mean, this movie's over 40 years old. It's quite a bit older than I am. And that shit looks nasty. But it doesn't look like fake or cheap or outdated. It just looks like, haunting. Also, just a little detail they include here that I really like is that Clark, who's clearly like the dog guy, is like, no, stop it when they're trying to shoot the alien because they're hitting the dogs also. And McReady's like, get the hell off me. But we can see Clark is attached to these dogs, and that attachment and him being the dog guy when the thing was the dog for a while and roaming the base makes him suspicious, obviously, the whole movie. And as the audience, you're like, oh, he's definitely one of them. But Childs, a.k.a. Keith David, a.k.a. the Arbiter, torches it like it was a flood infestation for him. Now we know that fire works on the thing. So they do an autopsy on this as best they can. And this is where the doc is like, it was trying to replicate it perfectly. So it imitates whatever it takes over. And then this is kind of where shit gets real for them in the movie and the audience the first time for sure. Because then you're playing a guessing game of who's been alone with the last infected person and trying to remember when they could have gotten infected and all that sort of thing. I'm mainly pausing here again just to show how good it looks. And the doc is just explaining that it needs time to imitate things. It's not like Agent Smith in The Matrix Reloaded where it can just take people over. It needs a little bit of time to meld with it, imitate it, and look like it and act like it. And right here, the doc puts it together right away.
Fuck.
He's like, Clark, did the dog act weird? And the guy's like, no. And then you can tell the doc is suspicious of him, but Clark is like, what? Like, what do you want from me? And he's like, nothing. So he's already starting to have a breakdown because he realizes how scary the thing is. So after that incident, they finally get a chance to watch the Norwegian tape, and we can see them blowing up the ice, and it's a UFO underneath the ice. And they estimate it to be about 100,000 years old. So obviously the alien was able to be frozen for 100,000 years and come back to life. And this is the first time in the movie that Kurt Russell actually says Norwegians instead of the Swedes. Because now he's like, oh, this is actually pretty fucking serious. He's not being so dismissive and kind of cavalier. And it's not a huge deal, but I just like those kind of little details where just the wording changed slightly and you can tell his attitude has changed toward the situation. So they figure out where the Norwegians were digging, and Kurt Russell's like, okay, let's go. And again, just a nice little contrast when last time he was like, I don't really feel like it, but I'll go if you'll make me. And this time it's the worst conditions, but he's like, we're going, I don't really care. Because now it's a situation that has to be dealt with. So they get there and they're walking around the UFO and they're like, holy shit, how long this has been there? And then they see a cutout, obviously the same cutout that they saw in the base where the thing came out of. So Childs is calling this voodoo bullshit. They're all kind of skeptical.
I don't believe you.
They're like, what are you saying, McCready? They dug this thing up that's been frozen for thousands of years and it just wakes up in a bad mood and starts killing them. And they're kind of bickering because they're all getting stressed out. And he's like, I don't know, I wasn't there. And Knowles, the cook, the black dude on roller skates, is like, which one of you nasty motherfuckers is throwing your dirty drawers in the trash can in the kitchen? Again, another one of those things that seems like kind of weird or random or just nothing, I think the first time. But when you rewatch it, you're like, oh, the thing took someone and threw away the dirty ass long johns. And I think this is where we know speculatively that Palmer has been turned, because when we see him earlier, he has the same grayish long johns. Even though they all wear kind of light long johns, I think they match his color the most. And he also seems kind of like the biggest dirtbag. Plus, he's one of the first ones to get revealed. So I think he makes the most sense here. So they keep asking Blair if he buys it, and he never really says anything. And I think it's because he realizes that anything he says, the thing might hear. So he doesn't want to pick up on anything. Because then he goes and runs this very modern computer program, and we watch how it assimilates and takes over the organism. And then he runs a calculation that if this gets into a civilized area, how long will it take over the entire world? And it's 27,000 hours is the estimate, which is roughly 3 years.
But, well, there it is.
I think this is a really good way to have really big stakes, but keep the environment and the action really isolated and small. Because they can't leave the base, the thing can't leave the base. Obviously, its ship has crashed. They have no contact. They're getting into winter in Antarctica. So they're stuck there. But the consequences for failure are still huge. And we continue on and we see Kurt Russell looking at the Long Johns, trying to figure out whose they are, but the name tag was ripped out. And obviously the little detail again with him having the beer and the, I guess is that whiskey in front of him. And I just love little details like that where it's like, yeah, they would have their Long John's name because they all wear the same shit. And the thing was smart enough to take that into account when it busted through whoever it consumed. Just all those little details throughout the movie really add up to make this such a solid story and just one of the greats. And this scene I think is super scary because they've had this dead corpse in their base for a few days now. And I thought actually here the first time that I watched it, when Windows says we should just burn all these things and Benning says you can't burn the find of the century, I was like, oh, he's one of them. And you find out in like 2 minutes that no, he wasn't.
Surprise, motherfucker.
I love the idea of something being frozen for 100,000 years. You bring it in, thaw it out, and boom, right back to waking up and just consuming you. That's horrific. And just a nice little interesting shot here where they're talking about something in the background and we see the tentacle kind of fall off the table, blood pulling up. And this is also where you realize the first time that it doesn't need to be an entire entity. You know, you can't just shoot it in the head like you would a human. All parts of it are alive as kind of functioning individual organisms. And we can see this as the audience, but they don't figure this out for a little bit. So McCready is asked by Fuchs to go out to the vehicle and discuss what's going on because he has Blair's notebook and he wants to explain to McCready what's happening. And I find McCready's reaction interesting because inside he's like, come on, I just want to go to my shack and get drunk. And Fuchs is like, come on, just give me 5 minutes. And he kind of has to force him into it. And then even during this conversation, McCready's like, is that it? I don't want to hear it. Are you done with it? And it's kind of this interesting denial because I think that he understands what's happening. I mean, obviously we've seen him with the Long Johns. We saw him get kind of serious and stop really fucking around. But it's still interesting to me that he is trying to deny the reality of the situation before he really embraces it and kind of takes charge as the movie goes on. And we also get a little line in here when he's kind of trying to get away from him where he's like, I haven't slept in 2 days. Come on. And this is important as the movie goes on because, you know, as people get tired like that, when you're getting no sleep, once you get past a day, depending on the person, you really start to kind of wear down and break down mentally. And I would say become unstable. Some people start hallucinating and shit depending on how tired they are. And that's really important as the movie goes on because there's definitely points where he seems crazy, both to the audience and the crew. But the big takeaway here is that in the notes, it says, yeah, we burned them, but they're not dead. They still have cellular activity. So this is where they find out that these things kind of operate on a almost like bacterial level, even though they're combined to look like humans or whatever the case is. a really great, terrifying alien. And you tie that line in to when we cut back inside, Windows went to get Benning for something, and it's being taken over by the corpse that they just been having lay around in their place. Just really nicely executed and fucking scary. Windows goes and gets Bennings and Fuchs because they're right outside. And by the time they run back in, it's broken through the window and tried to escape. But it's still kind of fighting with the transformation, so it's slow. They set the alarm off, so everyone's able to catch up. And the thing kind of gives up, but does this loud howling noise. And I think it's interesting because the thing, the way they describe it, is like every part of it is functioning for survival. But then it has abilities to communicate like this, where it seems like it has the capability to think about functioning or surviving as a species also, not just individually. So quick thinking, McCready dumps over the gas, lets it fill up, and then throws the flare on it, because they know that fire works.
Yes, they deserve to die, and I hope they burn in hell!
And obviously at this point, we've seen kerosene mentioned many times in regards to the thing. So Gary's upset, McCready's stressed out, and he's like, he's my friend, I've known him for 10 years. And the implication is that he would be able to tell if it wasn't the real Bennings. And McCready's like, well, we got to burn the rest of him. So it doesn't matter. And I think this is the part of the movie where you can see the mental breakdown really start to take place. And after this, a lot of the conversations they have are overlapping. They're stressed out. They're yelling. They're all trying to kind of point fingers like, it ain't me. They gather all the parts up that they know are thing parts, put them in a pit, fill it with gas, and burn it. Simple thing, but just nice to see. If this movie were made today, it feels like there'd be one of those weird hippie scientists or mad scientists that would be like, no, let's preserve a small part of it for research.
It's a bold strategy, Cotton. Let's see if it pays off for them.
I literally just talked about this in Venom 3, where the symbiotes are saying, hey, the universe is at stake. And the main hot chick scientist is like, but we should be friendly with them. Let's not kill them. We need to keep them alive for science. And it's like, no, fuck that shit. You have a species level crisis. Deal with it. And just another little thing here. The only people that are missing from this image are Clark and Blair. But we know that Clark's a human later on. And Blair at this point is still human because of what happens soon here. So we have to wonder between Palmer, who we think is already infected because of the Long Johns, and Norris. We had to assume one of them was able to go mess with the blood in the next scene when they were collecting all these different parts around the base and everyone was kind of doing their own thing. So Kurt Russell's looking for Blair, who I just mentioned. And the reason I say that we know he's not the thing is because you can see here that he sabotaged the helicopter. Well, obviously the helicopter would be great for the thing to be able to get back to its spaceship. And then when we cut in just a second, Blair's cutting off all communications that would bring any other people here. So it's just the people in the base, and they can't bring people in to get infected and more people to keep track of, people that would bring a vehicle to get back to the mainland. So Blair has a meltdown, but he's obviously not the thing at this point. So here you can see he's just going fucking nuts, smashing everything, trying to isolate them in this base to protect humanity.
Boy, that escalated quickly.
Because he's seen the numbers and he's afraid of the reality of having something this dangerous in a high traffic place. I mean, if the thing had landed in New York City, it would have been impossible to stop. And I just want to point out a little editing fuck up here. He drops the axe, uses the gun, and then when it cuts, he just has the axe again. But they wrestle him to the ground, subdue him, and try to contain the situation. Kind of messed up. He kills all the dogs. I'm not going to show that. And then they lock him in the tool shed because he's just mentally unstable. But they don't think he's the thing, obviously, because of what he was doing. And he just explains, I don't know who to trust, but tells McReady to watch Clark. Because obviously Clark was around all the dogs.
But I will be watching you.
And there's no way to know if the other dogs got infected, which is why Blair killed them. And this conversation's not a huge deal, but I do like it. Gary is like, okay, let's just hold up till spring, wait till the rescue team comes to get us, and we'll get the hell out of here. And McReady is immediately like, no, we need to figure it out. Right now, hopefully it's only one or two of us. The longer we wait, the more opportunity it has. It could be all of us as that thing when the rescue team shows up. So McReady, even though he's kind of blasé about the whole thing and then in denial, he also acknowledges the reality of the situation. And Childs says, if I was a perfect imitation, would you be able to tell that it wasn't me? So they ask the doctor if there's some kind of test they can do. And he says, we can take the stored blood that we have. I guess they have blood reserves because they're in Antarctica. If somebody gets hurt, you need a blood transfusion. Obviously, you can't just run to the hospital. So he says, why don't we use the blood reserves? Because we know those are good. Have everybody give us some blood and we'll mix them. if the blood that you give us takes over the blood reserves, we'll know you're one of the aliens. So a pretty good plan. Doesn't last long, obviously, because the thing is outsmarting them, but still nice. So like I said, the thing is outsmarting them. Again, just one of the things that makes this movie so great is that the alien is at least intelligent, if not highly intelligent, and can predict what they're going to try. So we have to assume that Norris or Palmer at some point was able to get the keys off of Gary, go open the blood bank, drain them all, and then put them back. Pretty sneaky.
Pretty sneaky, sis.
But also clever. I think it's always tough when you're trying to talk about predicting things and being clever. But when you just use straight logic, well, if something looks just like someone, what's the next step to look at? Something you can't see on the surface, something that's not obvious. They don't know if it can take people's thoughts. So, the blood. And that's actually the one thing I did like from the prequel, is where they were like, okay, let's see if people have cavities or anything that's not naturally a part of their body, because the thing can't imitate inorganic material. Which I thought was a neat idea and a different way to do it that still fit with the world. So they're asking who has access to it, and it's only Dr. Copper and Gary. And this is where I think they use the fear of the idea of an imitation really well, because immediately you can tell their reactions are, well, I'm not the fucking thing, so it must be him. And I think it's a natural human instinct to just try to start pointing fingers and blaming other people.
But she caught me on the counter. Wasn't me.
And the actors do a really good job of selling it, obviously. I just love this, and I think there's very few things that use overlapping people talking very well. A lot of times, and a really great example of this fucking up is Mass Effect. If you've played it, in Mass Effect, you have these triggers where you can cut someone off. Instead of you cutting them off, coming in the middle of them talking, they talk and then they break their talking, and then there's like a little pause, and then you start talking. So it makes it obvious it was scripted. And in this, they're just kind of shouting over each other. It makes it really stressful to watch. And they're all like, oh, come on, that's bullshit. You know it's you. No, it's not me, it's you. And you can tell everyone's trying to make everyone else like look away from them. Like you want to be the one unnoticed, whether you're the thing or not, obviously. Things keep escalating, Windows freaks out and goes and grabs a shotgun. And Gary's like, put the gun down. And eventually everyone's like, okay, calm down. They all put their guns down. And they're like, who should be in charge now? And Gary admits it shouldn't be him. So this is how we end up with McCready in charge. There's a little thing here that I like that you may or may not pick up on, where Child says, I'll do it. And Clark gets in front of him and says, like, hell you will. And you might think, well, why would he give a fuck? But if you remember back, Clark was trying to stop him from burning the dog alien thing alive. So obviously Clark has this really strong attachment to the dogs, fucking alien or not, apparently. And he's like, I'm not gonna let you be in charge after you torch my dog. We kind of end up with McCready just by process of elimination. And he's been pretty calm and cool and collected the whole time. So I think it makes sense for the characters also. Something else is interesting if I'm right and Norris actually is infected the whole time. They offer it to him first and he says, I'm not up to it. So is that the thing trying to blend? Is that the thing worried that if he starts making decisions, people might pick up on that he's being a little bit weird or not optimizing? I don't know. There's a lot of things you can speculate since we don't know exactly when everyone gets infected. But I think it's really interesting. So just a nice little thing here. They take out the blood bags. They don't know if they've been tampered with. Fucking torch them. I like the little speech here that McCready gives. It's not super epic or over the top or anything. But he's like, I know I'm human. And the fact that you guys haven't just overrun me means most of you are. Which is true. I mean, obviously, if the things had them outnumbered, they would just kill them, keep the survivors they could, and consider it a victory. And he's like, we got a storm coming in 6 hours. We need to figure out who's who. And another part where you're like, damn, the thing is really outsmarting them is that McCready singles out Gary, Clark, and Doc. Doc was around the corpses, Clark was around the dogs, Gary because the blood. And he's like, tie him down, keep him dosed up on morphine. Not sure if they know morphine would or wouldn't work on the thing. Maybe because the body imitates people they think it would. And even though I think it's a reasonable deduction, all three of them are actually not the ones.
Wrong.
And the guy injecting them is actually one of the ones, I think. So just another area where the thing knows that they're playing chess and they all think they're playing checkers. So we go to Kurt Russell, again drinking, keeping his little diary. He has the line where he says, the storm's coming in 6 hours. And then when this jumps, he says, the storm's been hitting us for 48 hours. So we know it's been 54 hours, roughly. And he's kind of just frustrated that they don't know anything about the thing. They can't figure out who's who. But he talks about how violent the thing is because it rips through your clothes, which is why it found the long johns. So he's kind of just grasping at straws here because none of this is really helpful. And this is another really smart scene where Fuchs is like, I'm trying to think of stuff. Now that we realize that a single cell is enough to take someone over, we should all make our own meals and it should only be canned food. And then when we cut later to Blair, we see him eating canned food. So it's a nice precaution and one that I think really makes sense in this context. Because you have to wonder, like, if it wipes a booger on you, would that be enough? Or gives you a wet willy or, anything. Just another dimension of what I think makes it so scary. So they're trying to find Fuchs because the fuse blew in the lab. And we saw Fuchs run outside. He found a piece of cloth that said McReady on it. And McReady tells Palmer, go with Windows. And if I'm right and Palmer got turned a while ago, Palmer goes, I ain't going with Windows. I ain't going with him. Which I think is really interesting and kind of an interesting move by the Thing to just keep eyes off him.
Stop looking at me, Swan.
So poor Blair at this point has been here for days. We have no idea when he gets turned, but I do like that he's made himself a little noose. And when McReady's like, hey, have you seen Fuchs? He's just like, it ain't Fuchs. Which kind of makes me suspect that he's already turned and that this is all just kind of role play because near the end of the movie, we find out that he's been dropping down under his cabin into a tunnel. So if he has this rope kind of pulley system set up as a noose, they think that he wants to kill himself as a human, but maybe he has some kind of thing he's doing as a counterweight. I don't know. You had to get more details, but I think it's an interesting idea at least. And on top of that, he's bitching. He's like, I don't want to stay out here anymore. I'm fine. Let me come back inside, which makes me suspect that he is the Thing at this point. I just wanted to pause here real quick so you could see that he is eating out of canned food only, which again, if he's the Thing, it's clever to pretend that he's being cautious. And if he's not, then you kind of feel bad for him because he's just getting fucked over. There's not a lot of times that I think movies do ambiguity well. This movie, I think, does it really well all throughout. And this is interesting because they find Fuchs burned, they find his glasses, they find a flare, and they're trying to determine what happened. And they seem to think that he ran into the Thing, they don't know which one, and then just set fire to himself to prevent himself from becoming the Thing. Which I think makes sense because when you go back to that scene, you hear a noise outside his door that he chases outside. And I guess death is less scary than becoming an alien monster that might fuck other people over. So McReady's like, okay, we're going to my shack now instead of going back. And they're all bitching. Knowles is like, why? And McReady's like, because when I left my shack yesterday, the lights were off. So Knowles, Windows, and McReady are going to his shack. Childs is pissed because he's like, how long have they been out there? And Norris is like 40, 45 minutes. They're supposed to be back in 20. And Childs is like, okay, fuck them. Let's lock everything up. Let them freeze. And somebody says, well, what if we're wrong? And he says, then we're wrong. So I like that Childs the whole time is just no hesitation. We need to get rid of anybody fucking suspicious. Even though it might not be the best move, I do respect the approach.
Because fuck them, that's why.
And something really interesting here, and I'm not sure if this is ever cleared up, start to struggle to breathe. He's like kind of breathing heavily, just doing basic shit. And then obviously in his death scene, they think he's having a heart attack and he's one of the Things. It imitated him and he had some kind of heart condition. And because it was so exact that he ended up having a heart attack as a fucking alien, he lets in Knowles and Knowles is like, I cut McCready loose. When we were out there, I found this. And he found the planted cloth, and he says it was stashed in the oil furnace. And I like that when McCready comes back, he's like, how fucking stupid would I have to be? And you don't think that it would have planted it there to make me a suspect? All very valid arguments, and again, just plays into the who's who kind of mystery of the Thing. And I love this because they're like, oh, McCready, when did it get to him? And we see Palmer and Norris on screen, who we now know in our rewatches are both already the Thing. And they're trying to play off each other like, oh, McCready's the one. And again, just deflect. They're trying to figure out who's who. And it all just devolves in to finger pointing and people not wanting their eyes on them. No one wants to be the one under the microscope. And I think these little scenes all add up just to really escalate the tension, where it's like every person is always worried about being under scrutiny. They're always worried about who to trust. It just makes it really tense all the way through.
Everybody just calm down.
Count of three, we're all gonna put down our gun.
They get another knock on the door, and Childs is like, fuck him. And again, Palmer's the one advocating for him to come in so they can torch him. And this makes me think that the Thing realizes that MacReady is the biggest threat to the Thing because he is mostly operating logically. He's pretty calm the whole time. So I just really dig this whole dynamic throughout the movie. Obviously on the rewatch, on the initial watch, you don't know what the fuck's going on unless you're super smart and catch a lot of details, like some sort of autistic long man.
The rebels.
And again, just another really interesting debate that doesn't get much time, but one of them's like, why don't we blow it away? And Childs is like, no, let him freeze to death and then we'll burn him. Both pretty fair points, and they don't have time to discuss it or philosophize or whatever. It's just a snap decision. And then Windows is the one who's like, Childs, what if we're wrong? And this is where Childs says, then we're wrong. I like the attitude. In this kind of situation, the amount of cold-blooded decisions you'd have to make to survive would be crazy. Pun intended on cold-blooded, by the way. I love this shot. Kurt Russell was the only one who had the key to get in this other entrance. Childs cut down the door, and he's like, get ready, MacReady, wherever the hell you are. And it makes you think back to the axe in the Norwegian base, where there was an axe in the door to the locked room. And this is also where we get to see MacReady look really unhinged. We know he's been operating on alcohol and no sleep, and he's got a full thing of dynamite. And he's like, you flame me, the whole base goes. And he's got his own flamethrower, so he's ready to die. Fucking awesome, super intense, and right in character, because MacReady knows they're going to back down, I think. And really interesting here, and I think deliberate, when MacReady says, put the torches down and back off, we see Palmer drop his right away. Windows does too, and Childs is undecided. Palmer, who we assume has been infected for a while, immediately doing it is just another nice little detail in there, because obviously he knows he doesn't want to be around fire. So something interesting here is Knowles and Norris are the ones who kind of tackle Kurt Russell, but he's like, if anyone touches me, we go. And then this is when Norris has his heart attack. And you have to wonder, is that the Thing in Norris with the heart issues, having the heart attack because of the dynamite would actually kill him? I don't know. Maybe I'm getting way too into it now. I just thought it was interesting that this is when he has the heart attack. And also this scene, I think, has to be a classic cinema scene. Like right behind the chest burster in Alien. So Doc Copper is trying to defibrillate Norris, and his fucking hands go through his chest. He's got this weird vagina-shaped mouth, and the teeth just chomp down. He loses his forearms, and fucking all hell breaks loose. This scene is so stressful to watch, even knowing what's going to happen. And also visually, how good does that look? Again, over 40 years ago. I don't know how they did these little like orange tendril or yellowish tendril things just flipping around, but they look fast as shit. And super gross. Very bug-like, which I'm assuming was deliberate. Ugh. So this is a really classic scene. Kurt Russell torches it, and the head stretches the neck and disconnects the hide. And then he tries to walk away as a spider thing. Fucking gross.
Oh, that's nasty.
They look so good. And even now, when you watch it, you're like, that's disgusting. It's not one of those things where you're like, oh, that looks old and cheesy. I wanted to pause for a minute here just so you could see this shot, where it's using its weird tendril thing to try to just hide and kind of escape the situation. And this is what really confirms for them that each part of the body or each cell is just its own thing. And that's kind of the metaphor they use, or that Kurt Russell uses when he starts torching the blood, is that it's just tissue for humans, but not for them. I just wanted to pause here so you could see how good it looks. It looks like a little weird alien spider with big eyes sticking out the top. And I'll be honest, the first time that I watched it, I was like, oh, please don't let it get away. Because my thoughts immediately went to Alien and the little chest burster bastards. This is a great shot where Windows sees it and they all turn around and the Thing is looking at them. And they just have this realization like, yep, this motherfucker lived on its own and he's going to get set on fire on his own. And this is maybe my favorite scene of the whole movie, where Kurt Russell has the flamethrower and he's like, oh, you tie yourselves down. Windows tie him down. And Gary, because he's freaking out, is like, rush him. He's not going to kill all of us. You would think at this point is one of the things, but he ends up not being one. Just really smart writing. I love the way it's portrayed. And also it's a good plan from MacReady, because you had to find some way to test the blood. They lost the good blood, so they can't compare it now. So now he's like, these organisms want to survive on their own, so we're going to test them on their own. And we get the setup from this knife blade over and over. And you can see that it's Clark, And this is one of those things where you're like, well, Clark has been the thing the whole time. And when he gets shot in the face here in just a second and doesn't turn, you're like, oh shit, he was just human.
I've made a huge mistake.
Like, does that make McReady right or wrong? I mean, on one hand, you could argue it's self-defense. On the other, McReady was trying to tie them all up and call them aliens. I'm not sure if either person was necessarily wrong, but McReady won. Clark charged him, McReady shot, done. We don't see the corpse moving, and we know they're going to burn him. It is what it is. And I think that's a great subversion of expectations, which I know a lot of cocksuckers like to throw around now, where the whole time you're like, Clark is definitely one of the things. He was hanging out with the Huskies, but he actually wasn't. He was just weird. It's a classic movie trope to have a character be suspicious, but actually innocent. And I think this is very well executed, because the whole time you're like, Clark is definitely one of the things. And even on a rewatch, it's like, how could he not be? But when you know he's not, it's kind of fucked up. But you still understand his actions, which is a huge part of what gives it rewatchability. It's what makes it good writing. It's just good storytelling. So you can't hear the dialogue, obviously, because I don't trust the copyright system. But McReady says, come here, Windows. We're going to test their blood, find out who's a thing. And when the camera pans up and it says, who's a thing, it's Palmer, who ends up being one of the things. Just a nice little touch there, especially when you've seen everything else going around him. Just a good little detail in cinematography. I love this scene so much because McReady is explaining it to them, obviously, and the audience. And he's saying, you know, when a man bleeds, it's tissue. When one of these things bleeds, it's on its own. And the face on all of them is like, this is horse shit. And then what follows is him warming up like a copper wire and putting it in their blood. And the first few fail, and you're like, oh, maybe it is bullshit. Like, maybe he's just going crazy. And you and the cast both buy in that, like, maybe the whole thing's horse shit, and McReady just needs some sleep. I just love the way that it's done. But it's also super tense, because every time he puts the wire in the blood, you're like, oh, is this going to be the one? Just such a good scene. And this is a super small thing, but when they're taking the blood, I feel like every person can relate to that feeling of just having your finger cut. Like, it's not the worst pain in the world. It's not crippling, but you're like, ugh, like, I just don't want it to happen to me. And just another one of those smart things where every time they touch the copper wire to the blood, you get the little steam effect. And you're like, oh, we're safe. Because you're looking for the time that it's not. Just another little detail where he's starting with himself and Windows, who's not tied up. My only complaint would have been that he should have done this before they got tied up. And then you say, okay, these two guys have good blood. They're not the thing. Then we agree to get tied up. But it is what it is. I love this too, where he goes, let's try Doc and Clark. They both end up being human. And then Childs is immediately like, well, that makes you a murderer then, don't it? Like, no fucks given.
You did good, son. You did good.
You know you just killed somebody. And then McReady, to be fair, is just like plowing through. Because what else can you do? He's like, okay, let's go on to the next one. Just all the power and character dynamics there at work are wonderful. Like, Childs the whole time has been kind of a blunt object where he's like, I don't give a fuck who we sacrifice. If we're wrong, we're wrong. And McReady is like, I'm using logic. Maybe it's not the right logic. I don't know. They're fucking aliens. Just a really great dynamic between the two. Now that we've had a few failed blood tests, Gary, who everyone suspects as a thing, is like, this is bullshit. This is nonsense. How can you expect us to believe this? Like, if all the blood tests come out negative, what? There's no things left? Just a really nice little addition in there, and it fits with his personality. McReady is holding Palmer's blood in his hand, and Gary's like, this is all bullshit. What are you doing? And McReady's like, yeah, you would think that because you're the thing. Like, you're the only one who could do the blood. And then when he touches Palmer's and it freaks out, then you're like, oh shit. And you're like, one of them worked. The blood's alive. Shit gets real fast. It's so good. I just wanted to pause real quick because I love all the acting here. All these dudes are tied up and they're like, holy shit, I'm tied to this guy. Get me the fuck away. Kurt Russell's flamethrower is freaking out. Windows is just frozen. It's so good because the whole time you're like, is this test going to work? They're all kind of calling bullshit. The guys that we suspected were innocent. And then you get one and you're like, oh no. I mainly just wanted to pause to look at the visuals. Like, look how disgusting this all looks and sticky and The skin is all stretchy. And poor Windows just gets his fucking head eaten because he hesitated. This is just an old school appreciation thing, but this is clearly a dude in a fire suit. Looks fucking awesome. It's so nice to see this and just know that this alien is melting, even if it's some poor stunt guy. And we get the nice extra touch here when the thing crawls out into the snow. It wants to put itself out. It's trying to get rid of the fire. And Kurt Russell just throws a flare on it and it fucking blows up.
Gotcha, bitch.
I love this so much from McCready's character. He comes back inside and they're all like, McCready, Windows is turning. And his gun has been fucking up. So he quickly grabs Windows that he dropped and uses it to fucking blast him. Just so consistent with how quick thinking he is, how kind of cold he is to make the right decision. All throughout the movie, whenever someone needs to be killed, he's like, time to burn him up. And this follows through all the way to the end credits scene. That he'll just do what needs to be done. And this is kind of a crazy edit. It literally goes from Windows on fire, shit's out of control, to just back to the blood test. Like nothing happened. Not a huge deal, but good to see that McCready, like Knowles, is proved innocent, lets him go immediately. He's not being like a dick, not being a tyrant. He's just trying to figure out who's who. So everyone else proves to be innocent or not the thing. And I love this line delivery from Donald Moffat where he's like, I know you gentlemen have been through a lot, but when you have the time, I'd rather not spend it being tied to this fucking couch. And he's just super pissed. I love the way that he delivers it, but it's also great because the whole time you're suspecting him because who else had access to the blood? McCready tells Childs, hey, we're going to give Blair the test. If we don't come back as a group or just the two of us, kill him. And this is obviously important for the end of the movie. And of course, when they show up, the door is already open.
You son of a bitch.
They had nailed it shut from the outside, so now they're like, oh shit, Blair's the thing. No surprise there, he was by himself for days on end. They fucked up. I feel like this is one of the most interesting parts of the ambiguity of the movie is when did Blair get turned? Because they walk in and they're like, where is he? He couldn't have gotten out because it was all boarded up. Kurt Russell steps in the hollow floorboards. They pull him up and they're like, oh shit, there's tunnels down here. He's kind of trying to build a spaceship, like using the helicopter parts that he destroyed. So a lot of this, I think, is left open to just kind of what you want to write in, which can be very bad. It doesn't really destroy the story because there's no timeline conflict. It's just a matter of when. I mainly just want to pause here so you can see that Blair is building something clearly inhuman, clearly not of our technology, even though he's using the resources that he has. So you have to wonder, at what point after he smashed the computer programs and killed the dogs and all that, did he get infected? So they're getting loaded up with dynamite, and Childs, who's supposed to be guarding the entrance, runs outside. And apparently there's a huge debate around Childs. My personal opinion is that he's lured outside, and then Blair goes inside, turns the generator off, and then Childs gets converted at some other point. Who knows? Besides John Carpenter, obviously. And as soon as Childs runs out, generator gets blown. They're like, what the hell is going on? Kurt Russell says 6 hours, it'll be 100 below out here. And for all you non-American peasants, 100 below is Fahrenheit. And Gary's like, well, McCready, that's crazy. He's like, not for that thing. It can freeze and wake up again. So he doesn't care if we all die out here. Another way to make it a super scary opponent. And I love this line too. And of course you have Kurt Russell, who's always awesome.
You tell him I'm coming, and hell's coming with me, you hear?
Saying that we're not making it out of here alive, but let's make sure it doesn't either. Just is what it is. You have to do what you have to do. And I feel that's a very old school message from a movie where you can't have your cake and eat it too. You just have to make a choice and live with it or die with it. So they start blowing shit up. And essentially this is full self-sacrifice mode. Things that heroes are made of and what makes it a great story. So the humans go full kamikaze mode and they're just burning shit down, destroying it, using gasoline to set it on fire. And I feel like they've set the stakes up to be important enough that this is the best solution. Because we've seen already, if the thing gets to a city, they're fucked. If a rescue team comes, they're fucked. So they have to do everything they can to win. Super stressful, really well set up, and really well executed. Just every step they've taken to get here has been chess versus checkers. They don't know what's going on. But now that we know, we're trying to fucking win. Even at the cost of our lives, which is awesome. It's what makes you like the characters on your first watch or your 10th. And you can see they're literally just going room to room, Molotov cocktails, because they know fire works. And I do love that Kurt Russell is the one throwing them when he's been drinking alcohol the whole time. You have to appreciate that he's willing to do whatever it takes despite his alcoholism.
I sent wave after wave of my own men at them until they reached their limit and shut down.
And we get one more last moment of despair when they're looking for the generator room and Gary says the generator's gone. And McCreary says, can you fix it? And he goes, it's gone, McCreary. Like the thing took the generator, it put it into its ship. That's it. Like any chance that we had, which is already low of survival, is done. And it just keeps ratcheting up the tension. Like every scene that goes on, you're like, oh my God, they're more fucked. But they're not out of it yet. So they finally come to the epic conclusion, which most Hollywood movies do, to be fair, that we just have to blow it all up. But fortunately for the thing, it actually makes sense. So they're going to walk dynamite and explosives down every hallway to certain particular points so that when it explodes, the whole base blows up. They're dead. The thing is dead. The thing using off screen again really well. We see Knowles walk toward the fucked up stuff with Gary and Blair. And McCreary is like, how's it going down there? And as soon as no one answers, he's loading the dynamite. Just no hesitation. Anything weird, you assume it's the thing. And that could be a good or bad thing, right? Because people are just weird sometimes.
Weird. I mean, seriously weird.
But in this situation, obviously super appropriate. And I love this because the thing is like full on Jaws, fuck you mode, here I come. But it's still not just a monster. It stops just short of the dynamite trigger and then grabs it. So now you're like, oh shit, the thing was smart enough to stop the dynamite. Now McCreary has no way to blow up the place, and he's the only one left. We see the nasty-ass monster, and this is one of those lines that I always wonder how people think it ages, where McCreary says, yeah, fuck you too. To me, I love it, because I feel like that's how you'd have to feel about this thing after all these days on end fighting it. It's trying to take over humanity. Like, yeah, fuck you too. But some people say like the aliens line, where she says, get away from her, you bitch, has aged poorly.
Get away from her, you bitch!
I still love it. Maybe some level of subjectivity there. This one, like, yeah, fuck you too. Super simple. I think super appropriate, so I love it. And we finally get the big dramatic explosion. You think everything is over. And this is where the ambiguous ending comes in. Because Childs disappeared for a while. The whole fucking base got blown up. And yet here he is. To me, it's very obvious. Some people say the breathing thing is bullshit. I think it's sufficient. So essentially what you see is they have this last little conversation. When McReady breathes, you can very clearly see it. And when Childs breathes, you can't. So to me, that's pretty definitive considering how detailed the rest of the movie was. There's a lot of argument around whether the breathing is just the camera angle or deliberate or not. To me, it's so blatant when you watch McReady that when you look at Childs and you see nothing, that's it. Like, Childs is the thing, McReady is not. And as far as I'm concerned, the thing won because he got frozen again. So here, I'll try to play a couple of clips so you can see and you can make up your own mind.
Where were you, Charles?
Thought I saw Blair. Fire's got the temperature up all over the camp. Won't last long, though.
So that's it for my review of The Thing. You can make up your own mind about the ending. Like I said, I love all the little details. I think it's arguably the best horror movie.
I'm the best. I'm the best. I'm the best.
And it's certainly my favorite. If you haven't seen the movie, absolutely go watch it. I don't know why you'd watch this entire review and not watch the movie. So I'm going to leave it here for this one. Let me know what you think below. If you've seen it, let me know what you think. I try to respond to all the comments that aren't just insults. Like and subscribe and all that shit. Thanks. See ya.